Welcome to Wild Side, your wild true crime podcast.
We're your hosts, who are sisters, storytellers, and truth seekers.
I'm Bailey, a therapist who is fascinated by all weird and dark human behaviors.
And I'm Chelsea, an educator here to unearth the facts behind the cases.
We cover true crime because some cases are just too dark to forget,
and others are too wild to ignore.
We're so glad you're here, so buckle up
and enjoy the ride.
What's up and stuff?
Hello.
What's up?
That is the one thing that I really love. Not the only thing, but that's one of the things I really love about Bridgerton is they're like, hello, dearest gentle readers.
Yeah, it's great.
That's great. Dearest podcast listeners.
Yeah.
Dearest Wildsiders.
Well, fortunately, probably for most of y'all, we don't really have anything to discuss before diving into this episode. So I think Chelsea's going to do a little intro and then we're going to get to it.
I kind of love that. I love just getting into it.
Roll your sleeves up.
With what?
I said roll your sleeves up.
Roll my sleeves up. You know, and it's kind of funny because sometimes just getting into it is the best way. And I think when we think about crime, we imagine a straight line.
Right.
So that's kind of what I think, right? You have truths and you have not truths, and you have a bad guy and you have a good guy. Like it's everything should be black and white, but some cases don't follow a straight line at all. Would you agree on that one, Bailey?
100%.
I think the more we know about cases, the more we're like, there's no such thing as a straight line. And I think that sometimes the mystery isn't just who did it, but sometimes it's more of like, what the heck actually happened? What in the what is going on? And so Bailey introduced a concept to me a while back, and it's a concept known as Occam's razor. And essentially it's this idea that the simplest explanation is usually the right one. And in many investigations, that principle holds true. The most direct answer, the most obvious theory is often correct, right? And that's why usually it's like, oh, the boyfriend did it. Because a lot of times it is. But every so often, a case really just resists simplicity. And that's really why we have Wild Side, where every explanation raises new questions. Every answer seems to deepen that mystery. And the closer you look, the more the facts refuse to settle into something that's, clear or logical, right? So the case of Dr. John Schneeberger is one of those instances, or one of those cases. This is a case about trust or mistrust, ? About science, about the limits of what we think is possible, and about how the truth can hide in plain sight long after everyone believes it's already been found.
So we're going to rewind back in our brains to the best decade ever, the 90s. For this case specifically, we're really hovering on Halloween night in 1992 in Kipling, Saskatchewan, which is Canada for all those folks out there. So Saskatchewan is pretty much a small prairie town, much like the South down here. Everybody seems to know everybody else. They know what you drive, where your auntie lives. They ask you, how's your mom and them? And it's likely a place with a lot of overlap. The school history teacher is also the football coach or the sports coach. The local attorney also owns the only local Italian restaurant. You know, that kind of vibe. Living in Saskatchewan at this time was a 23-year-old woman by the name of Candace Fonagy. Now, it's Halloween night, and Candace has just had a super big blowout fight with her boyfriend, and we've all been there. We're angry, we're hurt, we're flooded with emotions, and we're not really thinking clearly. She doesn't want to be alone, and she doesn't want to go home either. So what she does is she gets in her car, and she decides to drive to the Kipling Medical Center. She has a friend working there, and she decided she needed someone comfortable, someone safe, and a familiar place to go. And as soon as Candace walks in, she starts getting attention. Nurses notice her immediately. I mean, she's visibly upset. She's crying, she's shaking, and she's really struggling to calm down. A nurse asks if she's okay, and then she's suggested to sit down. And after a few minutes, someone recommends that maybe she should talk to a doctor, just to get double checked to make sure she's okay, to help her get through the night. And so Candace agrees. She is led into an exam room where she is let in and is allowed to wait. The room is quiet, and it allows her to really start to process everything that's going on. And then when the doctor walks in, she is flooded with relief because she recognizes this man instantly. It is her good old regular physician. She's seen him many times before, and he even delivered her child. And so she was like, oh, good. It is Dr. Schneeberger. As a side note, I always think of Smee off of Captain Hook and Peter Pan when I hear Schneeberger.
Oh, that is an interesting hook connection, if you will.
He asks her what is going on, and she starts to just really vent to him about the night, the fight with her boyfriend, and just not being able to calm down. He listens to her and he lets her vent, and then after a few minutes, Dr. Schneeberger suggests giving Candace a mild sedative to help her calm down. Doesn't sound weird or out of the ordinary. Sounds like something a doctor would do. And Candace, she agrees that she could use some help. So Dr. Schneeberger leaves the room and then shortly returns with a needle. He swabs her skin and injects the medicine into her arm.
Now, almost immediately, Candace feels something change, which she's expecting that she's going to feel different, right? He told her that it was going to be a sedative or a mild sedative, but her body starts to go heavy, numb, disconnected even. Her muscles stop responding in the way that they should. She tries to move. Her brain is thinking that her body is moving, right? Like she's trying to force her arms and legs to move, but nothing is happening. She tries to speak, but her voice doesn't come. Her mind is awake, but her body has stopped listening to it. She starts to slump, and Dr. Schneeberger is there to catch her and guide her onto the examination table. What he has given her is Versed, also known as midazolam, and it is a powerful sedative used in hospitals for anesthesia and procedural sedation. This is not a mild sedative. It relaxes muscles. It also causes amnesia and makes resistance nearly impossible, which is exactly how you want a patient to be if they're going through a routine surgery, right? But is Candace there for a surgery? No, she's sure not. She did not sign that box. This isn't an accident. Candace doesn't fully lose consciousness. She was stuck in a sensation like, it's kind of like being at the dentist, right? Where your mouth is numb and you can feel pressure, but you can't feel the pain, right? So you're awake, you're lucid, you know that something is there, you know that something is going on, but again, you're not feeling anything major.
I imagine it's a lot like an epidural. I had a C-section.
Yeah, okay.
I remember when, my OB was, dragging the baby out of me quite literally. I was like moving and shifting, and I knew I was being tugged, but I couldn't feel anything. So I imagine kind of what her description was like.
Yes. That's a great point, because I had a similar experience when I was delivering babies as well. So yeah. And then Candace realizes that she's definitely not okay. Nothing about this situation is okay. She's in the midst of being assaulted. Like, Bailey, can you imagine laying there knowing it's going on? And I think you can fill in the blanks of what type of assault we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely not.
And she can't move. She can't scream. She cannot fight Dr. Schneeberger off. The drug that was given to her has effectively locked her in her own body. Every instinct tells her to fight, but her nervous system has been chemically shut down, and she has now become a prisoner in her own body. When it's over, he pulls her jeans back up and leaves the room. Candace doesn't know how much time has passed. She's dizzy, disoriented, barely able to function. A nurse suggests, right? So the nurse comes in later, and she suggests that she probably needs to spend the night because she seems to be too unsteady to leave, right? That mild sedative, her body's just processing it weird. She probably needs to hang out there at the hospital. Again, this is sounding very protective and caring. And it's this quiet normalcy that's wrapping itself around something deeply wrong. And so Candace falls asleep there at the hospital. When she wakes up the next morning, she doesn't immediately know where she is, right? She feels spaced out, woozy, like a hangover, but a little different, right? It's harder to describe. Her body feels wrong. And as the night begins coming back to her in fragments, because remember, one of the side effects of this medication or the sedation medication is amnesia. And so things are starting to come back to her in fragments. And as they're coming back, Dr. Schneeberger appears at her bedside, checking her pulse like nothing unusual has happened. When Dr. Schneeberger comes to check on her, she asks him what drug he gave her. And he doesn't really answer her directly. Instead, he asks why. And then he says, "Did you have some crazy dreams?" Candace wasn't able to answer exactly, but by the time she leaves the hospital, she is still shaken and now is certain something terrible has happened. She just can't quite put all the pieces together.
Now, this next moment from Candace is honestly the most amazing thing, and it is so impressive. Even in her shock, after instinctually knowing something horrible has happened, even though she doesn't really have the memories to back it up yet, she decides to take off the underwear she was wearing and put it into a Ziploc bag. Again, she doesn't fully know why at this point. She just knows that she might need some proof. Somewhere deep down, she already understands that her word alone will not be enough. And the second amazing thing that this woman does is, instead of going home, she decides to go to a different hospital. Another hospital across town that has no affiliation with Dr. Schneeberger. So she goes to Regina Hospital, and she goes in and reports that she has been sexually assaulted and wants to undergo a sexual assault examination. So back in another hospital room, but this time having a completely different set of emotions and fears being challenged. She is stripped down, and the SANE, remember the sexual assault nurse examiner, begins the process. Blood is drawn, a vaginal swab is taken, and the physical evidence confirms at least one thing beyond question. Semen is present. Whatever she experienced in that examination room with Dr. Schneeberger was not imagined. Something happened. And for the third and final step in this amazing decision domino that this woman does is she decides to go straight to the police. So she goes to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, to the station and files a rape report against none other than the small town favorite golden boy, Dr. John Schneeberger. When she first begins to make her report, they appear to take Candace's report very seriously. They hear the harrowing details, being given an injection, her body locking up, that she was aware of what was happening around her but unable to defend herself or move or speak. And at this point, it's not just her word against his, because she had already undergone that sexual assault examination, and the physical evidence proved and confirmed that there was semen, so an assault happened. It supported her account that what she experienced in that room was not her imagination. So far, to the investigators, this absolutely looks like a case with a clear victim statement and biological proof that an assault had occurred.
After Candace's report, the RCMP contacted Dr. John Schneeberger and tells him that they need a DNA sample. And surprisingly, he does not protest or fight the request at all. He doesn't ask why. He even emphatically agrees to cooperate in any way he can. He agrees to provide a blood sample to prove his innocence, and the sample is taken from his arm, sealed, and then sent off for comparison against the semen recovered from Candace's exam. We all know that these tests take a little bit of time, and especially in the early 1990s when DNA testing is still relatively new, right? Weeks pass, and then the RCMP is contacted with the results of the DNA comparison from the semen recovered during Candace's rape exam and the DNA from John Schneeberger's blood sample. And I think you can guess. Well, if you guessed that it was a match, you're wrong. It was absolutely not a match, not even close to being a match. So on paper, that's supposedly the end of the story. If the science says no, the assumption is simple. There is no case. And perhaps Candace was sexually assaulted, but according to the DNA, it was not at the hand of Dr. John Schneeberger. With the results in, Candace begins to feel a shift almost immediately. No one calls her a liar blatantly, right? And no one accuses her of making it up. Rather, the questions, they kind of change tone. Are you sure about the timing? Could it have been a reaction to medication? Is it possible you misunderstood what happened while you were sedated? I mean, the implications, they're pretty much just hanging there, unspoken but heavy. If the DNA doesn't match him, then the problem must be her. Okay, now to be fair, if the DNA didn't match, then what's the next realistic question, right?
Yeah, I think it's much more complicated than, taking it directly to assuming victim blaming. I think it's a realistic question. You believe a victim when they come in, a rape exam's done, what's it called? Not the power of attorney, but the chain of custody. Is that what it's called? The whole process is done, sent off. The DNA comes back and it's not a match. So I think it's a normal thing for people to say, like, well, you were heavily sedated. Is it possible that you not made it up, but that it was a dream or something of the sort, right?
Crazy things happen, right? Like, I get it. So I agree. I don't think the intent was victim blaming, like you said. But Candace knows at this point she is, what is it, Bailey, that you always say? She's 10 toes down. She knows that something happened in that exam room. The paralysis, the pressure, the unmistakable awareness of what was happening to her body, right? She vividly remembers this at this point. But now there's a piece of paper telling her that the man she identified could not have done this. And when science contradicts memory, it's memory that people stop trusting, which again, I think that's normal. Slowly, but then also all of a sudden, right? It's that duality that happens. Friends start to pull back a little, somewhat unsure of what to say, and the town maintains the hushed whispers with the latest drama and accusations.
After the DNA exonerated, essentially, Dr. Schneeberger, despite Candace's own personal convictions on what happened, her case starts to kind of fizzle out. Dr. Schneeberger continues practicing medicine, and Candace kind of gets in a little bit of a rut. This is really where her psychological torment starts to peak. She is left doubting her own body and her own lived experiences. And so now, at this point, the questions start looping in her mind. What if I remembered this wrong? What if I did fill in gaps that weren't really there? What if my own body betrayed me twice, once in the room and again afterward? I mean, talk about a prison in your thoughts. For Candace, it's the beginning of a different kind of nightmare. This time, it's where the crime isn't just what was done to her, but how thoroughly reality itself seems to reject her version of it. And yet, incredibly, despite the DNA results, she just can't let it go. Because somewhere underneath her doubt, in the unspoken hush-hush whispers and accusations from people in the town, she is certain that the real truth of what happened to her hasn't actually been found yet. So she pushes forward, and she pushes back. A year later, now in 1993, Candace goes back to the police and requests for another DNA sample to be done. She wants to be absolutely sure of the results, and she is still desperate for answers. And kind of surprisingly, I know I was a little surprised by this, but despite, everyone kind of being like, I don't know, all the hesitations, ultimately what happens is the consensus morphs into the idea that, hey, if there is nothing to hide, why not just test again? So the police agree. And so now it's the same old song and dance. Law enforcement contacts Dr. Schneeberger and makes the same request. This time, however, something unusual happens during the blood draw on the good old doc. This blood draw, this time, the technician who came to take his blood suggested that they make it simple and they just take some blood from his fingertip. Easy peasy, standard, less intrusive, and it's an alternative if there are concerns about veins or contamination. But Dr. Schneeberger absolutely refuses. He's like, hey, I have this rare medical condition that makes fingertip draws unsafe, so you need to take it from my arm. I mean, okay, valid, right? The dude's a doctor. Obviously he knows what he's talking about, so the tech agrees. They continue the process. They draw blood from his arm, seal the sample up, and once again send it off to the lab.
And for a second time, the DNA does not match. For everyone else, this is confirmation. And part of me is like, Candace, I'm sorry, friend. Maybe something happened. You tried, you gave it your best shot, and I don't know what to tell you, but you got the wrong guy, right? But for Candace, she's absolutely devastated. And even though it was early, in the 90s, it was earlier in the DNA process, DNA just doesn't lie. By 1994, the case is officially closed. Candace may have been sexually assaulted that day in the exam room, but it was absolutely, without a doubt, not done by Dr. Schneeberger. She would not let it go, and when the second DNA test came back, not a match to the charming doctor, Candace was dealt a huge blow. And what happens because of all of this? I mean, she loses relationships, and she somehow now becomes the woman who accused the town doctor and couldn't prove it, right? She is the villain, and that kind of label sticks, even when nobody says it out loud or outright. With nothing but trauma and gossip surrounding her, Candace, she just is like, I've got to go. I've got to move locations. I just can't do this anymore. She leaves the town with so many bad memories, but the years never dulled her conviction, and that's what eventually pushes her to do something radical, which, I mean, I have to say, the character of Candace, I'm kind of like...
Dude, she's a whole mood, a whole vibe.
She is. If she's going to get something done, like, come hail or high water, good Lord willing and the creek don't rise, this girl's going to get something done.
Dude.
And I love it. I'm here for it.
Here for it.
So she decides that she, by golly, she's going to hire herself a private detective, a private investigator. And so she contacts a man by the name of Larry O'Brien. He is a former RCMP who transitioned into the PI sector, so he knows both sides of that fence line, if you will. When he hears Candace's claims, he begins from the beginning. He looks at the reports, the timelines, and finally the DNA results. And something about it just doesn't sit right with him. Maybe he's getting that same feeling that Candace had. Maybe she's good at convincing him, right, that something's wrong. I don't know, but he agrees that something's not right. Even though most humans take forensic evidence as an absolute, O'Brien knows enough about investigations to understand that evidence doesn't exist in a vacuum, and it is not absolute. There's always human error to be accounted for. And one way around this DNA debacle is to find another way to obtain Dr. Schneeberger's DNA. Not by drawing blood, but by something harder to control. He begins tailing Dr. Schneeberger and scooping up items that could contain traces of his DNA. The first attempts fail, either because the hair didn't have a follicle, or the envelope that he was able to retrieve out of the trash, like it was contaminated, right? It is a slow and frustrating process. But then O'Brien finds something small and easily overlooked: a used tube of chapstick. Bingo. That is it. He knows epithelial cells, which are essentially skin cells, right? The skin cells on your lips, they carry DNA, and they shed every time you swipe that chapstick across your lips. He smears the chapstick onto an envelope and sends it to a lab.
Now, by this point in the timeline, by the time that Candace hires PI O'Brien, pretty much everyone else has stopped listening to her. You know, they're like, girlfriend, we've got 2 DNA tests that have already said that this is not your guy, and it's done. Like, what are you doing? It's probably somebody else who worked there. Maybe it's just, something else that happened. I don't know, but it's not this, and it's not this dude.
It's giving me Maury. Since we're in the 90s, we can talk about 90s shows. It's giving me Maury, the Maury show.
Yeah.
Maury
For
Povich
sure.
show. And it's like, see, I told you. They were always like, I told you that baby wasn't mine.
Yeah.
Like, that is the vibe that it's giving me. It's like, it's not him. Leave it alone. Stop kicking this dead horse.
Yeah. How we were allowed to watch that, when we were homesick at 10 years old, I don't know, but here we are. The good thing, though, about like private investigators is they don't work for the system, they work for people, right? They're clients. And so when Candace had sat him down and told him what had happened, she believed it. And one of the things that he says why he believed it is because Candace's story was consistent. It never altered. It never changed. The details never shapeshifted. It was exactly the same every time she told it. And so, call it loyalty to clients, call it money, or whatever, but O'Brien is doing his thing. He is working for her even if everybody else has given up on Candace by this point. After weeks and weeks of waiting, the results are in. The DNA from Schneeberger's chapstick is a match to the semen found in Candace's rape kit. No ambiguity, no partial overlap. It is faux show a match. And so kind of all of a sudden, things are just oozing and exploding. All of the questions. How can two official blood samples say one thing while lip balm says something else? Was there contamination? Which one of the results is true? The two negative results or the one positive result? Was there a testing error? Just nobody knew what to think at this point. And so Candace and O'Brien obviously take this new evidence back to the police. And kind of arguably, the police have no choice but to pursue this. And so the case is officially reopened. And the first thing that the RCMP does is they order a third DNA test. I know that it's technically the fourth, but it's the third for the RCMP to manage. But this time they wanted to make sure that there are no shortcuts, okay? They want the blood draw filmed, right? So this time they get homeboy Dr. Schneeberger in to do the blood draw. It is filmed. There's a third-party witness in the room, and every single step is documented to remove any doubt about the integrity of the sample. And so this time, the technician suggests a fingertip draw, like they did before. And again, Schneeberger refuses. He insists on blood from his arm. And so the tech continues, put the needle in his arm, but something is really weird. Something's off. When the tech starts to draw blood, the blood that comes out isn't bright red, but it's like dark and thick, almost brown. And I mean, I guess they were just like, that's weird. I don't know. But they sealed it up. They sealed it up, shipped it off to the lab. And then when the lab gets the sample, well, it's too degraded, right? They tried to work with the sample to get a DNA profile out of it, but ultimately it cannot be reliably analyzed. So once again, we're kind of at a dead end. And the case stalls for the umpteenth time, right? Because, you got to see where these law enforcement officers are coming from. There are two DNA matches, or DNA not matches. They have one from a private investigator who scooped chapstick out of a trash can that matched Schneeberger's to Candace's rape kit. So everybody's just kind of in no man's land. And so nothing moves for another 5 years.
At this point, it's 1997, and there are cracks that begin happening, but it's not in the case. It's actually in Dr. Schneeberger's life. And these cracks are no longer subtle. Inside his home, his wife, Lisa, starts noticing things that she just can't explain. There are condoms that don't make sense, syringes tucked away, sedatives that shouldn't be there. And one name keeps appearing, that medication, Versed. It's the same drug Candace had been given years earlier. At first, these are just unsettling details, and they are pieces that don't quite fit. And then her 15-year-old daughter tells her what's been happening. Not once, not by accident, but repeatedly. Dr. Schneeberger has been drugging and sexually assaulting his stepdaughter. This time, finally, the system cannot look away. Police move fast, and full DNA, a full-blown DNA collection is ordered. Blood from the fingertips, mouth swabs, hair follicles, you name it, they're collecting it. Multiple witnesses, everything is being documented, everything is controlled, no room for any sort of explanations or exceptions. This time, when the results come back, the truth finally collapses inward on itself. Every sample taken from Dr. Schneeberger matches, and it matches perfectly to the stepdaughter's assault kit. And consequently, it also matches to none other than Candace's rape kit. The DNA taken from his chapstick, all of it aligns. 5 years of doubt, silence, and procedural confidence falls apart at once. The story everyone, even Candace sometimes, thought they understood turns out to be built on a lie. In early 1998, Dr. John Schneeberger is formally arrested and charged. The charges include sexual assault, administering a stupefying or overpowering drug, and obstruction of justice during the investigation. The case moves forward the following year.
Okay, by the time that the truth starts to come out through the legal process, it truly just does not sound real. It sounds like something no one would ever think to do, because no one really should ever have to imagine doing it. See, the thing is, Dr. John Schneeberger didn't just lie to police, and he didn't just manipulate evidence. As it turns out, he turned his own body into a crime scene. And so this is what happened, and this is how he got away with the DNA shenanigans the first couple of times. Somewhere in his predatory brain, he made a calculated decision to cut into his own arm and surgically implant a 15-centimeter plastic tube beneath his skin. So basically, surgically implanting a fake vein. And what he did is he used another man's blood, preserved it with anticoagulants so it wouldn't break down, and put it in this surgically implanted plastic vein. So every time that police, early on in this process, every time that police asked for his DNA, Dr. Schneeberger was ready. He knew exactly what to do, and he had a little bit of control earlier on in the process before they did hair follicles and mouth swabs and all of that. In the first 2 times for the DNA samples in Candace's case, he got to choose, where he would go, the lab, the people who drew his blood. They all knew him. They trusted him. It's a small town. He knew exactly where to guide the needle. He knew the technicians again would trust him, and they did. And over and over and over again, they literally were drawing blood from his implanted fake surgical vein. They were drawing blood that he kept in his arm under his skin that nobody knew about, and it was blood that wasn't his. So naturally, when they ran the DNA sample, the semen wouldn't match because it's a completely different DNA. So what's crazy is the science did exactly what it was supposed to do. It just never stood a chance because the man controlling the process unfortunately understood it better than anyone else. 3 separate DNA tests, technically 4, right? Multiple labs, years of confidence built on a single devastating assumption that the person being tested was acting in good faith, right? Good old doctor. He wouldn't surgically implant a fake vein of somebody else's blood in his arm. No, who would think that? It's ludicrous. Doubt drained away from him and poured directly onto Candace. The evidence initially said no, so the system stopped listening. But Candace was never mistaken, and she was never confused, and she was never exaggerating. She was telling the whole ass truth in a world that couldn't imagine someone with that kind of power doing something so fucking crazy and getting away with it.
Once the deception is uncovered, everything that came before has to be re-examined. The hidden tube of blood, that is the wildest sentence I think I've ever said.
I know. I mean, the thought of it is nuts to me. Like, this dude literally was, he was like sitting in his office or in a shitty, probably not a shitty car, probably a nice car, but a shitty car, just being like, how can I rape
Evade.
Women?
Yeah.
Right? How can I prey on not even just women, girls, and get away with it? Because he knew DNA even so early in the 90s. And he was like, oh, I'll just implant a whole ass fake tube of blood under my arm and nobody will know. Like, that is the craziest thing to me. Crazy.
It really is. It's one of the craziest sentences I think I've ever said. The hidden tube of blood, the falsified DNA test, which that's such a weird thing too, because they're not fake DNA tests. They, like Bailey said, they are giving real results, just not on him, on somebody else. John Doe of somewhere in Canada. I bet he was a nice guy. The years of carefully maintained lies, all of it forces a new understanding of what really happened. Evidence that once seemed conclusive now looks far less certain, right? And the confidence that had been silencing Candace for years begins to unravel. For the first time since that night in 1992, the system is forced to confront a reality it has overlooked. But recognizing the truth is not the same as delivering justice. When the evidence becomes impossible to ignore, what follows is not a dramatic turning point, but a series of formal steps. The investigators move forward, the arrest is made, the charges are filed, court dates are scheduled. The machinery of the justice system begins to move, not with visible outrage, but with the quiet efficiency of procedure. The same institutions that once deferred to John Schneeberger, which again, I feel like Bailey and I have talked about this. I don't think they were really in the wrong for not believing all of the evidence. But again, they did defer to John Schneeberger, now processed him like any other defendant, and public attention turns to the legal case ahead. By the time the case goes to trial in Regina in 1999, the central question they've pretty much been answered, right? The DNA evidence is clear, the pattern of behavior is established, and the methods of deception have been exposed. He is convicted and sentenced to a whopping 6 like the number after 5, 6 years in prison. On paper, it appears that accountability has finally been reached. I mean, if you want to say it, 6 years is not great, but whatever. But justice, especially when it comes after so many years, rarely feels complete. A conviction cannot erase the long period Candace spent questioning her own memory or the damage done each time the evidence seemed to contradict her account. It cannot restore the trust that was gradually worn away or change the reality that the system did not simply fail to help her. It repeatedly reinforced the idea that she was wrong. After the conviction, the consequences of Schneeberger follow in a series of administrative decisions. His medical license is revoked, his marriage ends, and immigration authorities determine that his Canadian citizenship had been obtained under false pretenses while he was under investigation. His citizenship is revoked, and in 2004, he is deported to South Africa. Each step is significant, yet each unfolds in a procedural, almost, impersonal way, as institutions close files and move forward. For Candace, however, the ending is far less defined. There is no public apology, no formal acknowledgement of how many opportunities there were to question the evidence early. There is no thorough examination of why a single laboratory result carried more weight than the consistent account of a victim, or how easily credibility shifts away from her and settles on a man whose authority was rarely questioned. In the official record, the case is closed. But for the people who lived it, the consequences do not end with the verdict.
My thing is, Candace specifically, the stepdaughter, that's another horrific piece to this. But Candace didn't just survive being assaulted by a professional and someone in power and someone she trusted. She also survived years of gaslighting, like institutional gaslighting. It was unintentional, but it was still there, right? It's just insane. There's a phrase that was used, quote, "This is a glorious day that I've waited for 7 years." And it tells you everything you needed to know. This was a long time coming. And the thing is, Candace did everything right. She sought help, she preserved evidence, she reported it immediately, she persisted when it would have been easier to disappear, and still, right, she was doubted, not because she lacked credibility, but of course it was because it was such a crazy situation. This case really, I think, forces us to confront something, right? I think it forces us to confront the fact that evidence is not perfect. Science is not perfect. Even DNA is not perfect. That predators, when there's a will, there's a way, and they can exploit forensic gaps, right? Just like Dr. Schneeberger did. The DNA didn't fail. And arguably the system didn't even really fail. I think he just kind of outsmarted the system early on, right? What is amazing about this case is protocols changed because of this case. Multiple biological sources became standard, and greater scrutiny was placed on the collection methods of DNA. Independent observers are used, safeguards are added, right? Which is super good. To kind of close everything up, this case is not necessarily remembered because a doctor outsmarted DNA. It's remembered because a woman refused to disappear, even if the evidence told her that she should. She was not confused. She was not hysterical. She was not wrong. She was drugged. She was assaulted. She was gaslit, but continued to persevere and listen to her intuition. And that, my friends, is, I think, the most incredible piece of this all.
Yeah, I think this really gives us I think she models what it looks like to advocate for yourself, right? So
The
whether
epitome
it's,
of it.
yeah, like, so whether it's advocating for yourself or, advocating for a loved one, I think that she really gets a gold star. Thumbs up, 5-star review on that is what it looks like to advocate for yourself. That is what it looks like to have tenacity, to have grit, to just know what you know and know it unapologetically.
Yeah.
And that is something that I think I want to incorporate in 2026.
Listen, I think the scary part about this case for me is, let's say, because therapy wasn't as like popular and accepted in the 90s, but let's say Candace came to my office, right? She was like, hey, I saw your profile on Psychology Today. You are a highly recommended trauma therapist, and I need to work through this trauma that I have. And if she started telling me all of this stuff, like just the facts of it, and then she gets to the part to where the DNA didn't match twice, right? Like let's say she's my client sitting in front of me and the DNA didn't match. I don't think that my knee-jerk reaction would be, maybe homeboy put a tube under his skin and it's not really his blood. Like, how conspiracy theorist does that sound? You get what I'm saying? Like, even as a therapist, I would question, and I wouldn't maybe make it sound so insulting or what have you, but even as a therapist, Chelsea, I would have a hard time trusting her memory when there's DNA evidence that is not backing what she's saying. So again, I don't really think like in this case, the system failed her. I think that a predator was just really good at doing what he did. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Well, how many times have we listened, to a kid? I'm gonna say a kid just because, we're both in the stages of parenting where you listen to your kid and you're just like, oh, honey, I know you probably think that happened, but it probably didn't happen like that. You know what I mean? Or it was just a dream, or because you rely on your own logic, you rely on your background, and those are good things. Like, that's what makes people a safe and a reliable person. Yeah. And sometimes it's just not that cut and dry. So,
dude, especially with this, like, it's the craziest thing, because there's even times when the baby will come to me and she'll just be in a mood, right? And she'll be like, there's something in my shoe. And I'm like, there's nothing in your shoe. You're just being a brat. You know what I mean? Like, that's my knee-jerk reaction. But every single time, I'm not kidding, every time I take off her shoe, there's something in her shoe.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm like, how many times is she going to have to tell me that there's something in her shoe for me to be like, yeah, there's probably something in your shoe, instead of like, this is a way for you to get out of like getting ready for school because you don't want to go or whatever. You know what I mean?
I know.
But yeah, I mean, if this dude put the effort and energy it took him to do this shit, like, what if he put that to like cancer research?
Dude, I think we say that all the time, right? Like, I think that's the number one thing that we're always saying. These people are brilliant. Do it for good. Find a better hobby.
Yeah. I don't know. This is one of the wildest things I've heard. I just don't know how some brains work that way, but, thankfully.
Yeah. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, thankfully mine doesn't. All right, you guys. Well, as always, thanks for hanging out with us through this wild and crazy ride.
And we'll catch you on the wild side.
Bye, guys.
Later, Gators.